Number one, robust platform. I think that's a foundation block for all of us. Number two is how we make the organization nimble and responsive to change. And number three is how we go explore, how we go and innovate. And I always put this picture of people drilling oil and, drilling for oil wells. You're going to hit 1 in 100 is going to actually produce oil, but you have to go and explore. And if you have not the philosophy of exploration and failure in the organization, then that just won't encourage people to do what they need to do. So on a robust platform, why is this important? Well, you just open the paper on any given day and you will see a technology failure happening in front of you. In fact, technology is, despite all of the words of the vendors, is probably one of the most fragile things on the planet. This is just a list of some of the recent things that have gone wrong in banking technology. Commonwealth Bank of Australia giving away free cash from their ATM, JP Morgan, 40 hours of downtime on their consumer internet bank. It fails all the time. And if we don't recognize this, certainly the regulators are seeing this, and it drives for us as people become more in tune with using us every single day and all the time, this has to work much better. So a big focus of DBS is how we build that robustness. And, if we think about it from an airline perspective, everything has two engines, and clearly that's a focus for us, is how we build this resilience and reliability. But actually, interestingly enough, if you compare the reliability of most high-performing technology today, 99.999 is an often quoted figure. If you do the maths, that's 10,000 times less reliable than today's aircraft. And if you think about the grounding of the Dreamliner from one battery fault in one system and apply that to technology, all technology today will be frozen out and closed down because it doesn't work. So we're kidding ourselves if we think we're robust today, and that's why the regulators insist on near this 100% and would require us to build something more like this, a 6-engine plane. Obviously, we don't want to do that, but you can understand where the regulators are coming from. Same thing in security. We're getting robbed more and more frequently. Technology has only aided that, and we've evolved from one-time passwords to tokens to now digital signing. But every time we evolve something, they figure out a way to crack it. And if any of your organizations are just at the point of launching digital signing tokens, we should chat, because boy, do I have news for you. So this challenge of technology, maybe biometrics is a thing. We're exploring that. The problem with biometrics is, certainly with endpoint devices, is they all end up down at what we really want is, which is how we enable easy access through a smartphone device. And as we know, those devices are very, very susceptible to being jailbroken, rooted, dingled, and more of our attacks are based on the mobile platforms. So it's a very difficult balance that we need to make. Of course, most of us have bring your own devices. No strategy in place, although we're starting to evolve that because that has to change. And then people keep talking about the cloud. This is kind of what we think about the cloud. There's no way we're going to fly our airplane into that thing just yet, because we really don't believe they sorted out the security, and the overflow effect, certainly from public cloud, private is fine. So robust platform, number one thing that we focus on. Number two is how we make a nimble organization. And this really is not just about changing technology, but about changing the way we operate as a firm. When I first arrived at DBS, somebody showed me this as one of our technology blueprints. I don't know what it is about technologists, but they always like to put boxes and then connect them with lots of lines. And I say, get rid of the lines, it's too confusing. This is literally a picture of our customer account system and how it links to other bits and pieces. And the scary thing about this is when I showed this internally, one person sort of put up their hand and say, hey, that's part of our core banking system. They knew what this was to me the scariest thing. And if that's how technologists feel and think, how are they communicating to the business? So a big part of simplifying the thing out was to get a very, very simple blueprint. We now have something with no lines on it, and it's a very simple coding. Green is good, amber already is bad, and we need to change the amber from amber to green. And everybody gets that, and we actually call this the buy, sell, hold diagram, so even the business guys get it, because everyone understands that buy is good and sell is bad. And that's really how we drive our whole technology roadmap, and we have these very intense discussions now. The senior leadership team of the firm gets together for 2 days once a year to really, really stretch this and figure out what are the priorities, how do we transform, and how do we get alignment. Once you have that alignment, you can do a lot more. But we went further than that. We said we don't have a system of change in the organization. And I run the operational groups as well, and so developed this thing we call process improvement event. And we've saved hundreds of millions of customer hours through process engineering has gone through technology. Again, about making the organization nimble. And we were reported recently about how DBS has slashed customer wait times through a lot of these interventions that we're doing that don't require technology, they just require smart process. The thing is, with all this technology we build, it's like a question of, is everybody using it effectively? And you can put a great set of gym equipment in place, but unless people go exercise, the gym equipment is pretty useless. And we have a program called Last Mile, which really starts to figure out how we get everybody to adopt every single piece of technology we put in place. We figured we needed to redefine our whole SDLC, and we have this program around the firm called Lean IT. I can talk about it later if we have time. And then, as data has become more and more important, we decided last year that we needed a chief data officer whose job would be to understand how data flows with the organization and how to manage it. So these are all structural things that we've done that are not really related to technology, but just related to the fact that we're on this cusp of a change, and we need to change the way that the organization operates in order to respond. So once I have that, then we can start to go explore, which is the fun part of all of this. And as I say, I use this idea of a drilling well to go figure out where the new oil is. Here, we're encouraging people to experiment, to analyze, and entice customers because the landscape is changing so rapidly. If we look at this, the size of the bubble indicates the activity on that particular channel. And just draw this in. This other diagram shows the momentum of where we're going to. Look at mobile. It's completely taken off for us. We've had huge success in that platform. Internet banking is growing as you would expect it would. Interestingly, our ATM volume is also growing, and branches declining at an accelerating pace. The amount of traffic that goes on there falling very slowly. So the question is, as a CIO, what's the strategy? You have to have one. You have to have a belief as to how each of these channels evolve, and it's a responsibility, I think, of the technology folks to go force the organization to rethink banking based on the momentum. The other interesting thing on this slide is social media. People talk a lot about it. If you look at the size of the bubble there, it's a pinprick, and that's actually much bigger than really exists. And the issue to us with social media is, yeah, it's interesting, and the marketing guys play with it, but it hasn't really penetrated deeply, so it's a fundamental channel that people use, and the question is, what should we do? And then the last piece of this puzzle, as you see ATM is growing, people normally take out cash. And if I look at the volume of cash transactions going on today, this is how it would look on that diagram. It overtakes any other channel. It's expensive to us, and it's very, very hard to get people away from using it. So again, that for us is a key question, because not only is it costly to push cash out there, but it also keeps track of what the customer's doing. If we've changed transactional information, then what is behind this big bubble is a whole load of information about where a customer is, what they're doing, what they're spending it on, and we're losing all of that information because we're handing out cash and losing sight of the transaction side. It's a big problem. So if we take something like an ATM, typically, and again, I'll take this evolution, typically we've thought of the ATM as a transaction processing device. A customer comes up, they put their card in, they do a transaction, they get money. It's an output device. And all those channels, we typically think of output devices, but as we rethink and reposition and start to think about information and knowledge, we've made one fundamental switch. And the fundamental switch we've made is to say, let's not think about this anymore as an output device, but an input device. And if you think about a channel like an ATM as an input device, then what happens? And if you guys in your shops are still using system diagrams with arrows on it, and you've got the arrow pointing as the cash goes out the ATM, just ask your technology people to reverse the direction of the arrow and see what happens. We've had amazing, amazing results from this, and we've sort of featured in SaaS publications and others for the analytics we've applied just to this single channel. If you take that forward and say, well, what about other channels? What about the call center? Let's use that as an input channel, and to do that, we've used some technology to turn voice to data, and are now starting to analyze those conversations. Again, it's giving us amazing insights that we never had before because we always considered this as an output device to serve customer transactions, not a place to derive information and knowledge. So as this whole data journey evolves, we move forward. Initially, we started gathering transactional information. Now we move forward to start thinking about what social media information is out there, and then can we use the data to derive behavioral information? Can I use this inputs, all of this vast data that I now understand is there by switching the arrows around to understand how the customer's behaving? And if I understand that, how would I use it? And then we come on to this whole question of knowledge. And again, if you haven't Googled Watson yet from IBM, go do it. It's fascinating how they've used unstructured data and from that derived enough knowledge that they can now win this game of Jeopardy, which is asking cryptic puzzles of a number of participants. I won't go into it. It's fascinating. And it's now been used in the medical industry. And Watson now, it takes all of these medical journals and other things in, and it's able to diagnose cancer patients way more accurately than doctors. So what about the information in our organizations? Now, very interestingly, DBS moved building in our HQ just last year. And when I run real estate as well, and so when people came back and said how much storage space we needed, I said that's ridiculous. And to paint the picture, I said if we were to build all of that storage space vertically, and then you were to stand on top of that physical paper pile that you created, this is the view you would get of planet Earth. That's the view. So that's how much paper people wanted to store. And actually what we did is we scanned 12 million documents in a 6-month period. We turned all that stuff into information. We now store that in our data centers. But the point is it just sits now on some FileNet server for reference purposes. Question is, what knowledge is in that pile of paper and how could we use it? And really this comes down to the real application of big data because these are HR records. So what if I was to correlate HR records with my information now that's coming out of the call center now that I can digitize that? What would that tell me? And as we start to think about, big data is sort of understood now, but I think the analytics part isn't. And, hands up, which organization here doesn't have an analytics group? Okay, everybody's got analytics group. And let me ask another question. For those analytics groups, has anybody got an organization where it doesn't sit in some kind of marketing or consumer area? That's where everyone's marketing functions is, analytics function is. So you've got big data around the organization that can drive all sorts of things, and you've got small analytics because it's focused in one little department on one problem area. And really, to me, the real challenge with big data is I've got big data and I've got mini-lytics. And how do I get big lytics, which is really what you want because that drives the whole data equation. So let's go on. I'll just close by talking about the last thing, which is how to entice. It's great having all these insights, and I've got my robust platform, and I've made myself nimble, but that's not going to necessarily entice customers to come and want to bank with DBS. So a big question we keep asking ourselves is how do we create this compelling, simple ecosystem that wants customers to come back more and more? And so we think about the future of banking. And actually, most people have got their Facebook pages. This is our DBS one, but they get little traction. What we did is we said, let's use social media to redesign the branch. And this is what happened. This is a branch designed in Facebook. We ran a competition. We took the best ideas. We hired a couple of people who were playing at the competition, and they built this space, which is used in an area that gathers a lot of student student customers. It's a pretty cool thing. And as we went on to build and envisage our new HQ branch, these are some shots of what it looks like. And we have this whole avatar thing. You can play with a screen. We have iPads with all sorts of content and form filling on it. We have these kind of super cool pods. But really behind all this was not that we wanted to create fancy technology, but it comes back to how we wanted to change the customer journey. And what came first with all of these things was a contemplation of what a new customer journey would look like. The technology came later. And then if I go back to the point I made at the start, if we're changing from banks being a transaction place to an information and knowledge place, then you have to sort of think about how you would articulate that. And what we did is in our branch, in our HQ branch, we built a TV studio together with the financial news company, and we broadcast from there information and knowledge about what's going on in the market. And really, that's to signal a change of who we are. That originating from our main HQ branch is broadcast around the region, knowledge of what's going on in the financial markets. In the mobile space, we've had huge success. In fact, we were voted number 4 last year in a research company's report out of Switzerland where they look at the top 50 banks. And the breaking news, actually, which we just heard a couple of weeks ago, is that this year we came number 1. And that's 50 banks globally looking at how their mobile switch to serve wealth customers. We feel, obviously, quite proud about that, but we wouldn't be ignorant enough to say that actually, therefore, we've succeeded. We don't think we have at all. All we've really done is move transaction to the mobile. We haven't created a new way of operating. We're experimenting with NFC. We're the first bank in Singapore to launch mobile payments. We have this tap-and-go system now, credit card on the phone, and if you have a Samsung device, you can roll that out. But to be honest, activation rate is very slow. And what we've failed to do yet, and this is why we think this award is fine, but we're not going to rest, is we haven't managed to create the psi effect. We haven't, if you think about what happened here, right, is that this single individual, through a very simple thing, it was one simple dance that he came up with, made people want to go and watch him. And when he came out with his next video, it broke all records in terms of viewings again. So what is the psi effect for banks? That, to me, again, as a CIO, is one of the hardest but most interesting challenges. And that comes back to my concluding slide, which is to say, I think as we move forward and we think about information, we think about knowledge, we think about channels as input devices, what does that mean for a new ecosystem of banking? And how, as a CIO, can I help push the company forward to envisage what this may look like? With that, I'll finish. Thanks for listening, and enjoy the rest of the conference.